As you're probably aware, Davos 2022 took place recently, with the so-called elites of our world visiting Davos, Switzerland for the World Economic Forum's annual event. They sit around on stage at one panel discussion after another, talking about their vision of tomorrow, and the ideas expressed at Davos will eventually filter their way through to the public consciousness by means of the narratives pushed in the controlled mainstream media and the policies implemented by our politicians, who are basically puppets of the World Economic Forum. All of the grand designs of the technocrats always seem to require that we, the little people, have to have our standards of living compromised and our freedoms and privacy violated in the name of the greater good, or fighting crises that are actually manufactured by the globalists themselves. Put simply, it's all about neo-feudalism. The oligarchs truly think of themselves as being above us and uniquely qualified to rule us, and it appears that far too many among the general public are willing to basically accept this state of affairs. COVID restrictions gave us an insight into how people are willing to outsource their intellectual faculties to those deemed to be the authorities in this world. A so-called expert says you have to wear a mask because their bogus science study says masks help to reduce the transmission of a virus, which actually isn't true. But Joe Normie spends no further time investigating this claim and simply complies out of laziness and perhaps lifelong acceptance that the government is an ultimate and final authority in his life, in whom he should blindly obey. Basically the mindset of a serf who lives in service of a king. The conquered mindset that permits our governments to do whatever they choose, or say for example increase our taxes, introduce laws that undermine our private property rights, or even infringe upon our freedoms, or confiscate a portion of our wealth. It's fair to say that the public's ignorance as to the real science surrounding COVID or climate change, which actually debunks both of these as scams, that's only part of the problem. The fact that the general population believes the lies peddled by the mainstream media is not the primary challenge we face. It's only part of it, because ultimately none of the false narratives, deceptions, and distractions that are forced into the public consciousness would be successful if it were not for the unquestioning trust that many in the public have in state authorities. The central issue that I believe we face the world over is this unconscious and kind of default acceptance of and submission to a ruling class. For some reason, a lot of people seem to want to be told what to do and how to live their lives, as if stuck in a kind of infantilized state where they wish to be taken care of by an almost parental-like figure. This conquered mindset must end, and the people must stop looking to human leaders, saviors, and elites to save them or govern and rule them. I think the dependent state of mind of many in the Western world has perhaps evolved as a result of decadence and relative comfort and material abundance, whereby people generally want the status quo in their lives to continue and are willing to do whatever it takes to maintain their standards of living, including falling for the trap of surrendering their freedom for so-called security, surrendering their liberties and rights for just 2 weeks of some kind of curve-flattening tyranny. As the world was, of course, to find out, it was a pretty long 2 weeks. Ultimately, the centralization of power is what the globalists want, which is the model of governance and control whereby the people are far removed from where political decisions are made. While the so-called elites demand that we surrender our privacy, they demand more security and privacy for themselves. While they demand that citizens around the world give up their guns, their summits and conferences are surrounded by armed police and soldiers. While they lecture us about lowering our carbon footprint, they fly to Davos in private jets. Ultimately, they want the public to believe and accept that they are above us, that they are a privileged class that are bred to rule and permitted to bypass the rules, restrictions, and prohibitions that they design for us. This is what makes them believe that they are the elite after all, the modern monarchy with their loyal and obedient subjects beneath them. Anyway, let's talk about a few key highlights from Davos 2022. World Economic Forum founder Klaus Schwab and Pfizer chairman and chief executive officer Albert Bourla discussed the following.
Some people may argue, why should I get vaccinated if there is a treatment? Well, how would you respond?
Because I think the goal is not for you to get sick and then treat you. The goal is to prevent the sickness. And that will maximize your chances to do well, and that will maximize the chances of people that you love not to get infected.
I thought the intention of everything from the lockdowns, masks, social distancing, and jabs was to prevent death. Of course, we know that the entire pandemic was a scam, but what exactly are you trying to achieve here? To prevent people from getting sick from a virus with a higher survival rate than the flu, assuming the virus even exists, as I've said many times.
Yeah. You vaccinate not only for yourself, you vaccinate also to protect society, and particularly to protect those that you love the most, because they are the ones that you are together.
Again, as I've said a million times, why would you vaccinate yourself to protect someone else who's vaccinated? Again, the literal redefining of how vaccines are supposed to work in a desperate attempt to get as many needles into as many arms as possible.
What do you foresee? Most of I think we set the standard, because in Switzerland, for those who do not know, there are no restrictions anymore. So we set the standard that we require vaccination. Now, how many vaccinations do we need in the future?
It's a very good question. And I think, first of all, I think we will need vaccinations in the future, but also I'm concerned that the compliance of the population with the recommendations of the experts will not be very high. More people did the first dose, and then lesser did the second, and then lesser will do the third and the fourth.
Probably for two reasons. Firstly, because many people were made quite sick or injured by the jabs, and secondly, because they began to realize that taking medicine on a regular basis when they're not sick is just utterly absurd. Nature provides everything we need to keep our bodies healthy. Good health doesn't come from big pharma.
And so for that reason, we need to find a solution that makes it easy for people to get. And I think this solution, it is the number one priority is to have a vaccine that lasts a year. So once people know that it is once a year, I do it every autumn, for example, fall, I think that will improve the amount of people that are getting the vaccine.
In other words, the boosters every few months push failed, so now you're trying to make it so it's just one per year. More desperation.
And I think there are also certain attempts to combine it with a anti-flu vaccine.
That is another very good way to make it, to improve compliance. If someone thinks that I'm going to go to the doctor or to the pharmacy, but at least with one shot I will get two, flu and that also will increase the number. So these are the things. It's very difficult to improve the efficacy right now. It's very, very high. But what you can improve it is how convenient it is and how can last the efficacy for a longer period of time.
The casual use of the word compliance, to me, is very disturbing in these kinds of conversations. The term uptake might have been a better choice, but compliance as a word sort of gives the game away. A soldier complies or obeys the orders given to him by his superior. So does a prison inmate when he obeys or complies with the instructions given to him by a prison guard. And I believe that is how they see us, as their inferiors, because ultimately this is all really about public obedience and adherence to the rules and orders of the elites. Another highlight of Davos 2022 was this clip from Alibaba Group President J. Michael Evans.
We're developing, through technology, an ability for consumers to measure their own carbon footprint. What does that mean? That's where are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So, individual carbon footprint tracker. Stay tuned. We don't have it operational yet, but this is something that we're working on.
Yeah, so I've mentioned before, individual carbon scores will simply be a means of controlling and rationing everything that you need and use to basically live. This is designed to lower our living standards dramatically, And none of these rules, of course, will apply to the elites. You can be sure about that. They'll be exempt from all of this crap. So, to conclude this video, I think that slowly the technocrats are losing the room, so to speak. The globalists are still in the driving seat, and the policies of Agenda 21, 2030 Sustainable Development Goals and the Great Reset, they're all still being pushed forward. But there is an increasing divide between government implementation of these policies and public support and acceptance for them. I'm actually very encouraged of late because the monkeypox narrative has failed to take off and hasn't driven the public back to March 2020 levels of fear. There is a fatigue with the war in Ukraine because people were up in arms about it a few weeks ago. Now that energy has basically disintegrated. I think there's almost an apathy about it now. I think here in Ireland, people are really quite fed up and just want to get back to their lives and make plans for the future. I think it's a great sign that less and less people are taking the jabs. So I think the food crisis and the digital currencies are going to be the last throw of the dice for the globalists to try to force people to accept the New World Order, and I think those things will ultimately fail. I do think it seemed like plain sailing for them when there was such high public buy-in to the COVID narrative in 2021 and 2020, but the pandemic is now over, and that level of buy-in is not translating to the new crises that they're throwing at people. So when I started this video, I talked about how they want us to accept our place as serf-like subjects of a kind of global elite monarchy. But now it seems that the public are beginning to, metaphorically, point at the king and laugh at his lack of clothes. The reaction to the monkeypox nonsense, the reaction of the future COVID booster jabs, the rising awareness of the influence of the World Economic Forum on our governments and politicians, the fact that people are seeing where these plans are designed to lead people to a future where they're supposed to own nothing, the fact that some people trusted the media, Big Pharma and their government, and yet they may have been injured by the jabs. It's not necessarily waking people up to the Great Reset and all the grand plans and the fact that it's all a giant conspiracy, but it is slowly breaking the spell of control that the public have been under for over 2 years now. And from here, we can begin to see the emergence of a growing public backlash against globalism, centralization of power, and government overreach. So while the technocrats will continue to throw new crises at people to get them to accept their quote-unquote solutions in another Hegelian dialectic, ultimately, I think, a lot of people are going to go their own way. Eventually, the truth about COVID will come out, although I think it's going to take quite a while for this truth to be widely known and commonly accepted. But I'm confident that the diabolical plans of the globalists are slipping away from them. I think in the short to medium term, they can still make things difficult for us, and I'm sure they will. But at the same time, the overall trend in the coming years will show us that freedom will win and humanity will thrive. 2030 is just 8 years away. You will own your private property, you'll be happy, and the perpetrators behind this global conspiracy will be defeated and prosecuted for crimes against humanity, and as a result, our lives will never be better. I think that idea terrifies them greatly, and I think where there is fear on their behalf, there is great hope for us.
Let's also be clear. The future is not just happening. The future is built by us, by a powerful community as you here in this room.
Oh my God. Oh, cringe.